Hey, what's up to everybody out there? Welcome to another edition of the Roundtable Talk. I am your host, C Money, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about another government PS that just disgusting. We're going to talk about it. We're talking about the Trump administration bill law passed. If you should know by now, that basically Trump has passed a spending bill law, which is cutting a lot of services to America. Two of them is which is the most used services, which is Medicaid and SNAP. And SNAP, for those who don't know, is food stamps. You know, and it is to say that this is not the only two services. There is other services that he is cutting. He's also cutting FEMA, which is the organization or government organization that oversees disaster reliefs and other things, like when there's a hurricane that goes through and they oversees it. He wants that to be controlled, and he wants to state to control that type of, he wants the state to control to take over controlling of that, meaning that he wants to delete the FEMA organization and have the state take over the services and stuff like that. And not only that, he wants to get rid of the National Weather Association, and get rid of that as well. And of course, there's other services that probably has been dealt with that I don't know about, and probably you don't know about, that's probably being cut into existence. But there's a lot going around. But we're gonna get right into this because this is my another situation. Just a few days ago, we talked about alligator Alcatraz and how that is one of the most worst things that's ever happening, and how much backlash and backtalk. Oh, and by the way, about alligator Alcatraz, lawmakers this coming weekend has been granted access to come inside of alligator Alcatraz. Remember when I did the episode, they had state representatives and government officials, local representatives and lawmakers, they was denied access to it because of the safety concerns of the immigrants. And this coming weekend, was granted access to come inside alligator Alcatraz. But there was a lot going on behind that anyway. And now you have the Trump administration passing this bill that is cutting a lot of services. Now I'm gonna talk about this. This to me is a disgusting situation. Me as a content creator, as a YouTuber, and content creator, whatever you want to call it, a host of this show, I know most of my opinions that I reflect on me, and most of you may get upset or may not get upset or may agree or disagree, but it's only a show. It's my opinions on certain things. So if I have my opinion and you disagree and you want to comment on it, that's fine, because you have that right to. As a human being, you have that right to. As an American citizen, this is the land of freedom of speech. But at the same time, I look at certain things and I feel that it's disgusting. And I feel this administration bill passed, this spending bill, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Because now, for food stamps, you're tightening up a lot of laws, because you see, food stamps is already hard for people to get on, because they require a whole lot. You got to require a lot of these, you got to have documents. You got to know if you're not working, they got to know information about you. You can't be a college student. You can't make even if you're making $2 an hour, they consider, hey, you're making money, so you don't need food stamps. In the past, I've applied for food stamps, and several times I've gotten denied, and I wasn't making enough money at the time to say, hey, I don't need food stamps, but there are people that, because they look at it as if, hey, let's say you make $500 a paycheck, and your rent is $600 a month or $700 a month, they're gonna look at it and say, "Hey, you have money left over to buy groceries. You don't need food stamps, but you realize you have car insurance, car note, electricity, water if you pay for water. You got other expenses that do. Because if you get paid $500 a paycheck, that's $1,000 a month. Your rent, as I say, is $700. $700. You have $300 left. You have to pay your cell phone. You have to pay your light bill. You have to pay your car note and car insurance. So that's cell phone, lights, water, car note, car insurance. And if you got kids, you got more expenses. So I look at it as if, how is these people is going to survive? And then they're saying, oh, now people are going to get less food stamps that has food stamps, and it's not really going to affect them. Yes, it is. Let's say you're a parent that got 2 kids, and with 2 kids you get $700 or $800 worth of food stamps. To me, that's fair because you have 2 kids and you're feeding 2 mouths. For me, $500 for 1 kid is fair. $500 a month is fair for 1 kid. $700 to $800 is fair for 2 kids. I know the more kids you have, the decent amount. And I know a lot of people, they have like 3 or 4 kids and they only get like $700, $800 a month in food stamps. To me, that's fair too. But now you're saying that they're only going to get $500 and they have 5 kids. How you going to feed 5 kids off of $500? Granted, it can be done because there are, like myself, if you know how to budget $500 for a family of 5, you can do it. Because a lot of these people rely on food stamps because the money they get from working goes towards bills. If your rent is $1,000 a month and you only make enough to pay your rent, you're not going to have money left over to feed yourself, let alone feed your kids if you have it. So at the same time, now it's about how you're going to feed yourself. A single person that gets food stamps gets no more than $200 to $300 a month, within that range. And that's a single person. A parent with a child gets close to $500. And if you have more than 1 child, you get over $500. We all know that logic. Some states may be different, but that's me in theory and guessing. In fact, it might be different. Let me know. Comment at the bottom of the page. Let me know. But it might be different. I don't know. But that's in my theory. That's what I think. Because in the past I've gotten $200 food stamps, and I'm a single person and stuff like that. And it's because for me in the past, I couldn't afford, bills. Because, back then in 2000, 2001, 2002, when the cost of living wasn't as big as it is now, and you was only making $5-6 an hour, it's like, we need to live, we need to survive, in these things. And a lot of these people, they rely on food stamps just like they rely on government assistance. And eventually they're gonna do away with, housing and Section 8 and all that. Eventually that's gonna be doing away. And I've seen a lot of agreeing with it and disagreeing with it. Because I've seen, there have been posts on social media, because I go to social media and look at these comments for these, when they talk about these spending bills and talk about these laws they put into place. I look at the comments. I've seen some comments that say, oh, they need to do away with housing and stuff, because these people is not going to learn to get off their feet and get a job, because they're going to rely on the government to take care of them, and they're going to be on government assisting for years and all this mess. I don't think that's the case. In a way, I agree. In a way, I don't agree. Because there's people that's in their 20s and 30s that is on government assistance or Section 8 or housing or HUD or whatever you want to call it. And they think that that's the best way to live and survive, and they stay on government assistance and housing. Remember when Governor Rick Scott was in was when Rick Scott was the governor of the state of Florida, and I think I talked about this a while back, and he decided that if you wanted to get any government assistance, you would have to pay $30 to take a drug test, and if you fail the drug test, you lose your government assistance, whether it's food stamps, Section 8 housing, whatever, and if you approve, you get the government assistance, and you also get the $30 back. Then the government and step in and say, you can't do that. You can't make people take drug tests, and then they deleted the situation all in one. They say, we canceling this. We stopping this. You can't make people take drug tests and stuff. Now, in theory, I got where he was coming from. I disapproved of the situation, but I got where he was coming from. Because a lot of these people that are on these government assistance, where they get Social Security, where they get food stamps, where they get whatever, they're abusing these things, and half of them don't even have nothing wrong with them. To me, a person that needs food stamps is a person that's living in poverty. If you're paying over $500 in rent, and you're only making $500 to $600 to $700 a paycheck, and you have 7 to 8 bills, of course you need food stamps. If you pay, let's say your rent is $900 a month, and that's living in the hood, because back in the day when you live in the urban areas or in the hoods, or as most of you would say, the ghetto, you was only paying $300 and $400 a month. Now you're paying them that $800 to $1,000 a month just to live in the hood, and it is ridiculous that you don't even live in a nice neighborhood. You live in a high crime density area, and you're paying almost $1,000 a month. And then you also in certain areas, you also in certain buildings, or certain, if you're living in an apartment or whatever, and even if you're living in a house, certain apartment buildings, you have to pay for water. I remember when I had my own place in 2006, I was living in a low poverty area, a low hood, low poverty area, and I was living in an apartment building. I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and I was paying for $75 a month, which was at the time a good deal for a 2-bedroom apartment. But at the same time, I was paying lights and I was paying water, even though the water bill comes every 3 months. But I was paying for lights and water, and I wasn't getting food stamps, and I was, and it was, a lot. And after a time, after a while, my rent went up $100, so it went up to $575, and I still had to pay for lights and water, and at that time I wasn't making a lot of money. I was young. I was in like my 20s, probably early 30s, if I'm not mistaken. I think I was in my 20s. I'm not for sure. Yeah, I was in my 20s, I believe. And it was like a lot, and I look at these things and I say, there are people out here that don't have food stamps, and they are struggling. One of my favorite places, like I said, I used to shop was Save-A-Lot, because Save-A-Lot was cheaper than Winn-Dixie and Walmart and Publix. They had cheaper things. And even though I told you in the previous episode, they have done away with Save-A-Lots in South Florida. I don't know if they're out in Florida, because the last time I visited a Save-A-Lot, it was in Orlando back in 2021, and they had a Save-A-Lot in Orlando, and I tried to look up like locations in Orlando, because I know all the South Florida locations have been removed, and there are no longer no Save-A-Lots. And a lot of these people are hurting because they have to resolve, because you don't have the resources and funds to say, hey, I make this money. Food stamps looking at it, oh, you have $2, you make $2, you don't need food stamps. They look at it as if you make $2 an hour, you don't need food stamps. You make $1 an hour, you make any type of money, you don't make food stamps. You can't get food stamps. They're making it harder for Americans to get assistance when a lot of these people need it. And my theory is, now you're cutting these funding to make it even harder. I don't think I talked about this. I probably did in probably previous episodes, where I said that the enrollment for housing, or Section 8, There's a waiting list here, and I think I did talk about this. I had a friend of mine who was on the waiting list for almost 2 years, 2 to 3 years. They no longer live here in South Florida because of course, like most people, they said, fudge this place, F this place. I'm finna go somewhere else where, the cost of living is not much and all that stuff. But I had a friend of mine who was on the waiting list, and it was on the waiting list for almost 2 years. And in certain areas though, you can go apply and blah 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 whatever, and then in no time you get in. Here in South Florida, they have a season where they open up the enrollment for housing and public assistance and all that stuff like that. And when that time comes, everybody posts it on social media. Hey, Section 8 is open. Let's go apply. It's time to apply. They're only going to be open for a couple of weeks. Go apply, blah, 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 and all that. And then you have to go and apply and do all this paperwork. And by you applying, you're only applying to be on the waiting list. And the waiting list is probably like 2-3 years long, because you know how many people are trying to get on, Section 8 and housing assistance and all that, because down here the cost of living is ridiculous. And then for now you're cutting services like this away because you feel as if you want to divert funding to other situations. You're trying to get rid of food stamps, what government been trying to do for years. You're trying to cut services like FEMA and the National Weather Association. You're trying to get rid of them and let the states take over that thing, and I'm going to talk about why that's a bad thing. You're trying to get rid of Medicaid, which right now is a godsend to a lot of people. And you trying to do away with, other services, because you realize Medicaid, because now if you look at Medicaid now gives you cash assistance. My mom gets it. I know a lot of elderly people that get it, where they have where you can now, they give you $200-$300 a month to where it can cover medications, not just medications, like if you need aspirin, like Advil or Tylenol or stuff, you can go there and you can pay for it with your medical card. If you need a bill paid or something like that, you have a couple of dollars, pay your bill with that. If you need medical supplies, you need a patch or something medical, or stuff like that, Pepto-Bismol or something, or you need a drink of water or something like that, or if you need something, you can go and pay for it. They give you a certain amount of money a month. And now you're trying to take these services away because you feel that you need the money, you need to free up some money to devote to other things. You want to pay for border walls. You want to pay, tax. You want tax cut for the rich. You want to divert services from a lot of Americans that use these services. You realizing, and this is what people don't realize, and I realize this: without Social Security, how will people be able to live? You will have a 90% homeless rate in America if you get rid of Social Security. There are a lot of Americans that rely on Social Security for survival, because you got a lot of these people who are retired, who are in their 80s and 90 years old. There are a percentage of people who have saved up money, that has thousands and thousands of dollars saved up, but that is their retirement money. Most people rely on their Social Security to survive. Let's say you live in a $2,000 place, because a lot of places, and I look at social media, I see apartments and studio apartments and homes going for $15 plus a month, and I'm like, that's $1,500 a month, not $15, $1,500 a month, and that's to live in just an apartment building or a rented out room that sits in the back of a house or something, and that's $1,500 a month. And I'm sitting up here like, most Americans only get $1,200 to $1,300 a month in Social Security, And I'm like, how can you afford $1,500 a month and you only get 1,000 to 1,000, 13, 12, 13,000 a month, and your thing is 1,500? That means an additional $200 to $300 you have to come with out of your pocket. And I look at this and I say, a lot of these people rely on food, Social Security for survival. I know people out there that lives off of Social Security and they only live off of it because they don't have saved up money. You know, a lot of these people didn't have careers where they made money and they can able to save up money to where they can live comfortably when they retire. A lot of these people, when they retire, all they have is Social Security. And it's like, now it's harder to survive and live because a lot of people have jobs that they probably pay decent money, but it's not enough to say, oh, I can put 1,000 away. I could put this. You probably make 2,000-3,000 a month, but your rent is $2,000. You probably make $2,000-3,000 a paycheck, but your rent is 1,000. Let's say you make $3,000 a paycheck. That's $6,000 a month. Your rent is $2,000. That's already, you already got $4,000. Your car payment is damn near $1,000. And I'm gonna say $1,000 because that's include your car payment, your insurance, gas, whatever. That's $1,000. So right there, you're already at $3,000. And I say roughly $2,000 because, you know, some apartment buildings, they're going for $1,000 to $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. So I just estimate $2,000. So, and then another $1,000 for your car payment, car insurance, gas, maintenance, upkeeps, whatever the case may be. So that's $3,000 already. So you're already $3,000 in the hole with that. Then, if you got kids, you got to buy clothes, food, services for your kids. You know, you got a lot. And then you also got yourself. So $6,000 is not much, making $6,000 a month. It may seem a lot, but it's really not a lot. To a regular single person, $6,000 and you got $1,000 rent, that's maybe decent, and that's decent enough. But $6,000 for a person who has 4 and 5 kids, that's a lot. That's not a lot. And they don't understand that you're taking away a lot of these services. It's hurting a lot of Americans. I know people that have 3 and 4 kids, and they're struggling and don't get government assistance, don't get food stamps, don't get nothing, and they're struggling as human beings because they can't get services, or they try to get services and it's hard for them to get services, or they try to live independent and don't need the handouts. And I look at it as if those are the ones who really need the handouts. And you got people walking around here healthy and not, because I know I've heard and I've had things where I've seen people where they get Social Security and they get government assistance, and most of them are nothing but crackheads and stuff like that, and they smoke up their money and smoke their crack and all that. And I look at it as if there are people that need to be on Social Security that needs to be on Social Security. Like myself, I don't need to be on Social Security. I may not be in the 100% healthiest thing. If you have a medical condition, whether you have HIV, AIDS, or like cancer and stuff like that, to me, that's not a reason for you to get on government assistance. That's not a reason for you to get Social Security. AIDS and HIV is not a disease that allows you to stay home and you have to get a check. You just have to know that you can't work in certain areas because of your disease and your medical condition and stuff like that. If you paralyzed and live in a wheelchair and you can't move, yeah, you need government assistance. Yeah, you need Section 8 and all that stuff. If you barely can walk, or you're over the age of 65, and you have a severe medical condition that requires you not to work, of course you need medical, government assistance and social security and all that. But if you walking around here happy doing all this thing, and you go, because I know there's people that go inside and they consider themselves as crazy as a mental patient, and they and then they go in there and they say okay, you get a check. No, here's the thing, you have to evaluate these people, because I know some mental patients, people that are and they walk around and they got jobs. They may not have, a decent job. Some of them, they be flipping burgers at Burger King, or they, wash dishes at a restaurant or something like that. And that I see them and they go to work every day faithfully. And I'm like, those are the people that, hey, you don't need a check because you walk around here with two personalities, or you got bipolar and all that. You don't need a check, because some of these people, they don't need these things, and you're taking services away from the people that really need it. I know people out here that don't, I'm not trying to put anybody's business out there. I have a relative that is mentally, and I mean mentally, where ever since they was born, they had a medical condition, and this medical condition, they have to live in a wheelchair, and they have to be taken care of with services 24/7, because they have I don't know the condition of them, but they live in a wheelchair, and right now they're an adult. They're in their early, they're like 18, 19, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how old they is, and all their life they had to go to a special school. They had to get picked up by a special bus, and they have to have round the care facility because they have a mental issue. That, my friend, and then they don't talk normally. They do that. They don't talk normally, and I don't. And I'm not saying that I'm not picking on them or things like that. But they have a medical condition that allows that they cannot do nothing at all. Like, they need round the 24/7 care. And so those are the type of people that needs him. When I used to go to work and I used to take the bus, well, not used to, I still go to work, but when, at one point when I used on the bus, I used to see this lady, and she used to bring, she used to come from the doctor's office, the hospital, whatever, and she used to bring, her daughter was in a wheelchair, and every day I used to see her daughter looked like she was, mentally disabled. And I say, now that's a person that needs a check. And I'm quite sure that the mother, works but can't work as much because she has to have round the clock care for her daughter. So I look at it, those are people that need services. You got people walking around here living and breathing, la 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 la, and they get all these government assistance and everything, and they don't really need it, because they're living, breathing people that don't work, but they just walking around getting the services. And I think that's what you need to do, evaluate a lot of these people that's getting these services, say, hey, you don't need these services, go out there and get your job, because we finna give your services to somebody else who really need it. And now that's what I think. Instead of cutting these services to people who need it and to everybody, you need to go and evaluate a lot of these people who get these services. And then 30% of these people out here don't need these services, and you can convert that 30% to other people who need services, and that's where your money going to. Instead of cutting all of these services all at once to people who need these services, you need to go and evaluate a lot of these people who get these services, and then cut some of these services to people so they can, better say, hey, you don't need these services, you make decent money, or, hey, you don't need these services, you walking around here healthy as a kite, do a medical test or something to say, hey, you don't need these services. And that's what I think. What do you think about this cutting of the spending bill? Do you think that it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing for them to be cutting these services? I honestly believe it's a bad thing. My thing is, you're cutting food stamps, you're cutting Medicaid, you're getting rid of FEMA, you're getting rid of the National Weather Association, you're getting rid of all of these services that's killing us. Because now, when a hurricane comes, now you're telling the state to take over, and FEMA supposed to provide funding for disastering people and all that. So now you're cutting services to where a lot of these people are not going to get these services, and it's going to affect their life. Some of these people are going to get They're gonna have to probably get evicted, or they're gonna try to prostitute or do something to try to get money. They're gonna be begging on the street. You have to stop this. You're taking food out of people's mouths, or you're taking services out of people's lives, to where now how they gonna be able to feed their kids. You're not thinking about a mother of two or a mother of three that has kids. You're thinking about, oh, this United States is broke and we need to fix this. So now we're going to take money from services and put it somewhere else so we can fix the problem. How do you feel about this? Let me know. Comment at the bottom of this page. Email me, roundtable00@yahoo.com. I want to know what you think about this. We are going to probably do a follow-up on this spending bill, but I want to know how you think about this. I thank you for watching this episode. Don't forget, as always, stay safe, stay blessed, stay hydrated. Don't forget to check out our other, episodes. Don't forget to check out our, hotspots in South Florida, history in South Florida, food reviews South Florida, traveling with the Roundtable Talk. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get updates on our videos, and you can check out our upcoming videos as well. I thank you for watching this. This is the Roundtable Talk. I am your host, C Money, and as always, I will see you in the next episode. Take care.